Have you ever thought about what makes a conversation actually good? One that draws you in and keeps your attention. Well, the older I get, the more intrigued I am by having a quality conversation. One that actually goes somewhere, makes me think, and engages me. So this sent me on a research project, a quest, if you will, to uncover some type of blueprint of what makes a good conversation and then how to actually architect it. There's got to be a formula out there, and I needed to find it. So today I'm going to give you, this blueprint, not the theory, the actual blueprint that I've tried. The conditions that have to be in place before a great conversation can happen. And also 7 elements that drive the quality of everything inside of that conversation. And every single piece of it connects back to where? The first 5 minutes. So let's get after it. Welcome to the Elite Business Connector podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Buckley, husband of 1, father of 5, and on a mission to help you develop, deepen, and master your business communication skills. And my promise to you is if you listen and subscribe, I'll bring my best content and energy every week to help you get better at communicating and connecting where? In a business environment. Here's today's big idea. Before a great conversation can happen, the right conditions have to exist. And before the right conditions can exist, you have to know what they are and how to build them, deliberately, every time, starting in the very first minute. And this is going to be a part 1 of a 2-part series on the anatomy of effective conversation. Today, we're covering the foundation, the 4 conditions that have to be in place before a word of any substance is exchanged. And then we're going to dive into the 7 core elements that determine the quality of everything that follows. Part 2 drops next episode. It's going to cover the arc of a conversation. What breaks that arc? And what makes a genuinely transformative conversation? Together, these 2 episodes are some of the most research-packed, but practically useful content that I've created so far for this podcast. So let's get into part 1, the foundation. The right conditions. When we walk into a business meeting, there are a few variables. Some we may know ahead of time, and others that we have to adjust to in real time. We're going to think through the 4 foundational conditions that set the stage for the possibility of this desired, great conversation. Condition 1, psychological safety. This is the foundation everything else rests on. And it seems odd that it's first. But it's the single greatest predictor of honest, productive communication. Every first business meeting asks the other person to take an interpersonal risk. They're deciding ahead of time how honest to be, how much to share, and whether to tell you the real problem or maybe just the safe version of it and back off. A sense of psychological safety stems from a negative answer to that concern according to psych safety. This mental process is happening and it's running in the first 5 minutes. And the person running it is not asking whether you're competent. They're asking whether you're safe. Harvard Business School's Amy Cuddy, whose research on first impressions has been cited in over 1,000 academic papers. And she found that the brain's first trust assessment happens, you ready for this? Faster than conscious thought. And it's primarily driven by warmth cues. Whether the person across from you appears to have good intentions towards you. Warmth before competence. Safety before any substance. And that happens every time. So in your first 5 minutes, psychological safety is built through behavior, not just words. It's that calm warmth that you're giving to the other person. Maybe it's asking a genuine question and actually waiting for the answer. Each of these behaviors sends one neurological signal, and it's saying, I'm not a threat. You can be honest. I'm safe. And that inverse is actually true as well. One redirecting interruption, a dismissive response. One moment where you signal, well, I already have the answer, or I don't really care. That psychological safety collapses before you've had a chance to really form that conversation. So in practical terms, when I leave with a smile, ask a question, listen and respond. Maybe give a one-liner like, between us girls, you can physically see the other person relax and feel safe. So condition number one, psychologically safety is foundational. The second condition is it's a clear intent. It's clearly stating where exactly you're wanting this conversation to eventually go. Every great conversation has a clear why. And research by Brooks and John at Harvard confirms that conversations serve two simultaneous goals: information exchange and impression management. And that's well-designed conversations accomplish both at the same time. When our intent is absent, or maybe it's just hidden, the brain fills the gap with, threat assessment, which means the other person's cognitive resources are kind of diverted away from any genuine engagement and toward figuring out what you're actually after. Naming your purpose of the conversation within the first 5 minutes is not a formal agenda. It's just basically saying, here's what I'm hoping we'll figure out together today. That single comment activates what they call collaborative thinking before you've asked a single question. Now, this requires something of you: intuition and practice. You need to feel it out. When, not if, is the best time in the first 5 minutes to bring it up. So personally, I rarely do it in the first minute unless I can sense they just want to know where we're headed in this conversation. What's my intent? Often, I find it's in the middle 3 minutes, but sometimes in the last minute of the first 5. It's basically nuanced. Here's a third condition: the right environment, physical settings. So that right environment with the physical setting could also be timing and pace. Well, they're not trivial. It's actually vital. Research confirms even small adjustments significantly affect conversational quality. Research has also found that relatively small environmental adjustments, think about reduced noise or adequate lighting, appropriate physical arrangements, can dramatically improve conversational quality. The environment is either working for the conversation or against it. And most professionals never stop to ask which one it is. We don't always get to choose the meeting environment, but it should give a clear indicator of the quality of our conversation if something in the environment is challenging. In practical terms, if I'm distracted by the wrong environment, I become bold enough so far to see if there's another location we could go with less distractions. Sometimes it's moving away from a lot of sound or people, or maybe it's just into another room, and that makes all the difference. If you're using OQ, which is what I call observational intelligence, you choose to be proactive and create the right environment as much as possible. It's often very possible if we're willing to make the adjustments. We care about that environment. And condition number 4, it's called mutual readiness. Science shows moderate emotional arousal is the neurological sweet spot for real engagement, which means too stressed, too distracted, or too rushed, and the conversation is compromised before it even begins. We're just not ready. Readiness has 2 components. First is cognitive availability, and second is emotional regulation, mental and emotional. Both are finite resources, and both are shaped by everything each person carries into the room. Research on reflective functioning found that people in a state of moderate emotional arousal were nearly twice as likely to be genuinely receptive to new information from the other person. This means that your readiness state doesn't stay only on the inside and internal. It transfers outward through our facial expressions, our vocal tone, our body language to the person across from you. So in practical terms, again, OQ, observational intelligence, is your best conversational friend. OQ will let you know to look for the signals from the other person if they're willing and ready to have a quality conversation. They may be physically or mentally or emotionally distracted. Just one of those doesn't put them in that readiness state to have a good conversation. Conversation, yes, but we're wanting to go to a good conversation, and that's a predictor. So either you try and change their readiness, which may be simply changing the environments as we just discussed, or you decrease your expectations of the conversation, at least in that moment. Right now might not be the right time, and that's okay. We're looking for the right conditions to have a good conversation. So we just discussed the 4 conditions for a quality conversation. Quick review, psychological safety. Does the person feel safe to open up? Clear intent. Both of you know where the conversation is going. Right environment, physical surroundings, sound, distractions. And that mutual readiness. Is the other person mentally and physically ready to receive this conversation? All four of these conditions are foundational for this great conversation to even have a chance. And they're also a prerequisite for where we're headed next with the 7 prerequisites for an effective conversation, which we'll break down after this short break. Over the years, I've identified 4 communication secrets that create an instant impact. Now, this is whether I'm talking to a CEO, a client, or a stranger next to me on a plane, but especially in a business environment in the first 5 minutes. The reality is we want to stand out from others, especially our competitors. How can we do it? Well, download the cheat sheet and find out. Think of this communication resource as an idea system that you can use mine or create ideas for your own. Once you learn how to leverage them, you'll be amazed how quickly they resonate with the other person. Grab this free resource that I call the 4 secrets every business connector uses to stand out instantly. And you can find that in the show notes. Download it, use it, practice it. It'll change how you connect with people in the first 5 minutes of every business conversation. Let's move now to the actual elements within a conversation in the second half of this episode. The 7 core elements of an effective conversation. Once the conditions are right, 7 elements drive the quality of what happens inside a conversation. I want to walk you through each one and show you exactly where they live in your first 5 minutes. Element number 1, rhythm. We start with the rhythm. Conversations need to have a rhythm and a cadence. It needs to find a natural back and forth that's called turn-taking. And it's not a courtesy. It's actually a biological feature of human communication. A cross-cultural study published by PNAS, covering 10 different languages across the globe, found a universal avoidance of overlapping talk and a consistent minimization of silence between turns. We're wired for this. But the reality is so many business professionals do monologues, not dialogues. We need to be aware if you're taking turns and is this conversation getting into a good rhythm. So here's the first 5 minutes angle. It takes a minute or 2 to get the banter down, if you will, in a new conversation. But nailing turn talking and rhythm sets up the rest of the conversation, especially past those first 5 critical minutes. Here's a pro tip. OQ, observational intelligence, is huge on awareness to notice if you're talking too much. This happens all the time, especially in sales. You need to become intimately aware of the conversation, banter, and rhythm. This is an advanced skill of an elite business connector. It's using that OQ in the moment going, do we have a rhythm here? Is it going back and forth? Is it more dominant on one side? Or are we playing tennis where the ball's going back and forth? It's being very aware of that rhythm. And it starts with that. And that's why it's element number 1. Element number 2, questions. No element has a more direct, measurable impact on trust, liking, and outcome quality than asking questions. Allison Wood Brooks and Leslie John of Harvard concluded in their landmark HBR study that questioning is a uniquely powerful tool for unlocking value. It spurs learning, fuels performance, and builds rapport simultaneously. Brooks' research on follow-up questions was incredibly decisive. They signal that you're listening to the other person, that you care about them, and that you want to learn more. She also named a pattern that kills rapport in business conversation. It's a term called boomer asking. Have you heard of that one? That's when you ask a question as a setup to talk about yourself. Classic look at me, not look at you behavior. The other person usually senses it immediately and the trust evaporates. Let me give you an example recently. I was talking to somebody and they asked me a question, well, how was your weekend? It was a complete boomer ask. Do you know why? They cut me off. Oh, let me tell you about my weekend. We did this, we saw that, it was awesome. How did I feel in the moment? I felt completely disengaged. The conversation ended It was look at him, not look at me. He asked the boomer asking question just so he could respond. So what's the first 5 minutes angle? Well, all 5 minutes, you should be asking curious questions, continual questions, and clarifying questions. Your first real question sets the intellectual tone for everything that follows. Make it open-ended. Make it genuinely curious. Make it one you don't already know the answer to, or if you do, leads to them talking more about them. So here's a pro tip. This is where 2QM, 2-question minimum, comes into play. Ask a question, then a follow-up question. And you know what? It can be easy as saying a statement, which is, tell me more about that. That simple little tool of the 2QM, that first question, engages the other person. Tell me more, or you ask a follow-up question on that, lets them know you actually care about what they have to say. And it's a huge element in a good conversation starting out strong. So that actually leads into element number 3, which is listening. Active listening is the most studied and most consistently under-practiced element of any effective communication. Research from the Annual Review of Organizational Psychology describes what happens when it's done well as what they called an episodic togetherness. It's a mutual creative thought process where both people generate something neither would have reached alone because they were listening to each other. Active listening has 3 quick behavioral components: paraphrasing what you heard, asking questions that build on it, and maintaining genuine nonverbal engagement. A meta-analysis of nearly 30,000 participants found that the association between perceived quality of listening and trust is consistently strong, and that matters so much in starting out with a good conversation. So the first 5 minutes angle. Well, the critical moment is in the middle 3 minutes. After you've asked your first real question and they've answered, resist. Don't rush to your next point. The research says that that pause is where trust is either built or squandered. It shows that you're not waiting for them to stop talking. You're listening so that you can talk. It's listening to understand. So here's a pro tip. I call active listening as locked in listening. Remember, I have ADD, attention distraction disorder, and I find if I mentally know I need to lock into listening to the other person, specifically in the first 5 minutes, everything positive happens. It lets me know I've got to set the right environment, where I'm headed, I need to ask questions, and I need to listen and lock in. Fourth element is validation. Validation is paraphrasing back what you heard is one of the most validated moves in all of communication research. It confirms understanding, yes, but it does something deeper. It gives the other person the experience of being genuinely heard. That experience is rarer in business than you might think, which is exactly why it creates so much trust when it happens. Now, most people do not do this conversational element, or if they do, it's lousy. This is a huge element to introduce into every conversation moving forward. And it requires the element of active listening. Imagine that. It's validating in the moment that you are hearing exactly what they're saying. It's very easy just to listen and look, and your brain's a million miles away. But you can't validate unless you listen. So the first 5 minutes angle is this. Minute 5 is prime time for reflection and validation. After they answer, reflect first. So what I'm hearing is your real challenge is X. Is that right? Then build. Don't advance until you've reflected and validated in that moment. It's hard to do, but it's so effective. When somebody does that to me in a conversation, I really feel like they're understanding what I'm saying, and it gives that locked in good conversation. So here's a pro tip. Sometimes a simple me too early in the conversation is a great place to begin this element. But here's a caution. Too many people hijack the conversation by validating and then jump into why and completely leave the other person feeling you just hijacked, well, their own story. Don't be that guy or that girl. So here's the trick. Say, me too, but back to you. Think of it like when somebody's on the news. They make their comments, and now back to you. So what we're saying in this moment, me too, it's showing, hey, validating that you're listening, but you're also putting the focus back on them by going, well, back to you. Now, either the other person will ask you about your experience, your Me Too moment, if you will, or you can look for an opportunity to bring up your Me Too moment soon enough later on. Here's element number 5 of 7, adaptability. Communicative adaptability. This is the capacity to adjust your style, your tone, depth based on real-time signals. It's been actually formed a study from Robert Duran's in 1992 communicative adaptability scale. Now, so the simplest definition of this that I found is adaptability combines flexibility. It's the willingness to adapt, which is paramount to a great conversationalist. They're keenly aware of every aspect of the conversation and willing to be flexible and adapt in a moment's notice for the health of the conversation. So many people are just unaware and don't realize they need to adapt on their part to make the conversation work. But not you, and not now, that you know this is an important element in a conversation. Let me give you an example. Adapting is realizing, man, this is really not resonating with the other person. They're not clicking in whatever I'm talking about right now. And it's being observed enough, OQ, that you're willing to adapt in that moment to do what? Maybe to transition to a different topic. That's key. But you're going to notice that in that evaluation. So here's the first 5 minutes angle. Minute 5 is your adaptability checkpoint. Based on everything you've heard in minutes 3 and 4, you can now recalibrate. What verbiage are they using? What tone? What do they actually care about? Are they paying attention? Adjust your approach to meet them where they are, not where you prepared to be. That's key. Adjust your approach to meet them where they are in that moment, not where you are prepared to be. So here's a pro tip. Back to OQ. You're constantly scanning the person and their engagement in the content of the conversation. And you're using that intel to decide if and how to adapt to make the conversation more engaging. You're aware, how is this conversation going? Can I take it from average to good and good to great? Element number 6, clarification. Here's the most underrated elements on this list. Conversational repair, as they call it. It's the process of detecting and correcting, any misunderstandings that are happening in real time. It's a cooperation signal. Your goal is conversational clarity. Research by Albert and DeRuyter frames says it this way. Repair structures are what upholds the possibility of organized communication in the first place. Without them, understanding accumulates until the conversation becomes useless. There's also documented preference for self-initiated repair. It's meaning that people prefer to correct themselves when given the space. Good conversationalists create that space. So what does that look like in the first 5 minutes in that angle? If something lands wrong, for example, a question gets a puzzled look, your framing misses, you're prepared immediately and without any drama. You might say, well, let me rephrase that. That move is not a weakness. It's the highest available signal of conversational competence. It's reading in the moment whether something is landing. If you know to go back and make a correction on something, or you're asking a clarifying question to help them to know, hey, let's figure this out here to make sure we're clear on where we're headed. Pro tip? Well, modeling is everything. You build so much street convo cred by simply being aware if what you're saying is confusing or not landing right with the other person. This goes back to asking clarifying questions. Am I making sense right now? Or any questions you have before I go on? The pause is huge to create space for clarity to happen and worth every second of it. I find this to be incredibly practical when I'm watching body language, not what they're necessarily saying, but I can see if they've got a puzzled look on their face, or you can tell there's just a sense of like, I don't agree with you, or like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Those are the moments where you're asking a question, you're tying back that element, and then you're looking for clarity to give that opportunity for them to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, or man, I misunderstood that. I thought you were talking about that. That is so key to get that resolved before you go on. And lastly, element number 7, honesty. Neurological research shows the brain processes honest and dishonest communication differently. When information is openly shared, these neural circuits associated with trust social connection and collaborative decision making activate. Here's the number that gets me every time. The brain registers, you ready for this? Whether you're being candid and honest in 0.00 seconds, sub-second. Before you've finished your sentence, the other person's brain has already filed you as a friend or a threat. Ed Catmull at Pixar made a useful distinction between honesty and candor. He says this: candor, forthrightness, frankness, puts lighter pressure on people. It invites real information rather than, performed information. And that's the difference between a meeting that produces insight and one that produces theater. We want insight. We want that good conversation to happen. We're looking for honesty. The first 5 minutes angle. Candor in the first 5 minutes looks like naming what you don't know, acknowledging what you're uncertain about, or saying something real instead of something polished. The other person's brain is reading you. Be worth reading. Lead by being honest and open to engage the other person. Here's a pro tip. Simply saying, "I don't know much about that. Can you unpack that for me?" This response goes a long way because it shows humility, curiosity, and a willingness to learn. And who doesn't feel good about being on the receiving end of that question? I found people relax and they lean in when you're not with a know-it-all and genuinely honest in the conversation. Go first. Create this environment. So there you have it. Let's talk through some action steps to get very practical here. First is check your conditions before your next meeting. Run through the 4 before you walk in the door. Am I building psychological safety from the first second? Have I named a clear intent of where this conversation, at least that you hope it can go? Is the environment around me set up to support this conversation? I'm actually present and ready right now, physically, mentally, emotionally. 2 minutes of honest answers will change what happens inside. Second action item. Identify just one element that you're weakest on. Of the 7 core elements we discussed, which one do you consistently skip or shortcut? Is it active listening, not asking questions, validating, adaptability? Maybe it's being honest. Awareness is the first step to changing these patterns. And third is audit your candor, your honesty. Before your next meeting, ask yourself, am I showing up polished or am I really going to be real? Find one place in the conversation where you can name something you genuinely don't know. Give that level of honesty. Pull them in. Then that signal will move. Honesty will do more for trust than any polished opener will ever do. Closing thoughts. Here's what I want you to carry out of this episode. Great conversations don't happen by accident. They're built, condition by condition, element by element, before the first word of substance is ever exchanged. Knowing this going in will change how you view a good conversation. And the 4 conditions we covered today, they're the groundwork. The 7 elements, they're the structure. And together they give you a blueprint that you can use in every business conversation you walk into from this point forward. The research is consistent. It's very evident. Psychological safety is not a soft concept. It's one of the most powerful predictors of honest communication that organizational science has ever identified. And every element from active listening to repair mechanisms is a trainable, practical skill that changes what happens inside the conversation when you use it. In the first 5 minutes, that's your window. Everything we covered today lives inside that window. The conditions you build there set the ceiling for everything the conversation can become. Elite business connectors, don't stumble into great conversations. You now have a blueprint. One last comment on this. Hopefully you realize these first 5 minutes set the premise for the ability for a good conversation. Recently, I had one. I used a lead talking point, find the 5 before the 5, to find 5 connection points, found a connection point that resonated with the person more than I thought. Next thing you know, they locked in the conversation. There was clarity of where I wanted to head in the conversation. And by minute 3, we were actually already having a good conversation. Now, that doesn't always happen the first 5 minutes. The first 5 minutes oftentimes sets the groundwork for eventually kind of that 5 minutes plus when we go into the conversation. But that conversation can go even in a business context. It can go between personal and professional. We want to make sure we create that organic environment. And where does that start? In the first 5 minutes. But we got to go in eyes wide open, making sure we're ready to have a good conversation. And we know how to create that environment for that to happen. So episode 20, this one right here is officially in the books. In and out, nobody got hurt. As always, remember to subscribe and to share the podcast. If you're listening to it, make sure you subscribe. If you are on YouTube and watching this, make sure that you follow and subscribe there as well. Leave a comment. Love to find out any of your takeaways. And if you're the extra mile guy or girl, consider rating the show. It generally helps get this content to more people who need it. All these episodes, main points and links are also in the show notes. And please consider grabbing these free resources that I offer to you. This week's one was 4 secrets every business connector uses to stand out instantly, and the link is in the show notes. One of those was creative one-liners. I mentioned one between us girls. There are examples like that. There are signature stories that I use. There are a handful of little things in there that will get you thinking. It's a great resource. So go to the show notes, pick that up today, and I'd love to hear from you. What was your biggest takeaway from this episode? How do you look at a good conversation? What did you learn from the resource that was provided for you? You can do that by sending me an email at Bryan@BryanBuckleySpeaks.com. Again, Bryan with a Y. Love to hear any questions you have, comments, ideas. I read every single one. Some of my best ideas actually come from listeners like you. Lastly, let me give you a sneak peek of the next episode. Coming up is in episode 21. We're going to pick up right where we left off. Now that we have the foundation and the 7 elements, it's time to put them in motion. In the second part of this episode, we're going to be covering the arc of every great conversation. Love that. It's the 4 phases every effective exchange moves through. Then we're going to talk about what breaks conversations, and then the patterns that reliably destroy any of the best setups. And then finally, we're going to talk about what actually looks like a great conversation from beginning to end. That's the goal. And part 2 is the map to get there. We'll see you next episode. And as my Chicago Bears chant, even in the off season, good, better, best. Never let it rest till your good gets better and your better gets best. As my father used to say, thanks for coming, but most of all, thanks for leaving. I'm out. You got this now.